By spring 1221, Afghan mountain passes. A prince stands before 30,000 desperate men and makes a decision that should have gotten every single one of them killed. Prince Jalal al-Din of the Khwarezmian Empire is about to do something so insane, so fundamentally against every rule of medieval warfare, that when Mongol scouts report it back to their commanders, they probably think it's a mistake, because what Jalal al-Din orders his cavalry to do, these horsemen who've spent their entire lives training on horseback, is to climb down from their horses, just dismount, stand there, on foot, like sitting ducks, and then face the most feared military force the world has ever seen. 30,000 Mongol horse archers who have never, ever lost a major battle. This is the story of the Battle of Parwan, and it's absolutely wild. By spring 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire, one of the wealthiest, most advanced civilizations in Central Asia, was completely gone. I'm not talking about defeat. I'm talking about total annihilation. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to smoking craters filled with corpses. Genghis Khan's armies had swept through like a biblical plague, and everywhere they went, they left nothing but mass graves and literal pyramids made of human skulls. Samarkand, Bukhara, Nishapur, Merv, cities with populations in the hundreds of thousands, centers of learning and culture, completely erased. We're talking systematic slaughter on a scale that wouldn't be seen again until the 20th century. And Jalal al-Din's father, the Shah of this once mighty empire, he ran, just straight up abandoned his people and fled from city to city in absolute terror while the Mongols butchered everyone behind him. He eventually died alone on a desolate island in the Caspian Sea, basically running himself to death from pneumonia and despair. So Jalal al-Din, barely 30 years old, is left holding the bag. He scraped together about 30,000 survivors, traumatized refugees, shell-shocked soldiers, basically anyone who could still hold a weapon. And he's facing an enemy that has spent the last 2 years proving they're essentially unstoppable. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Before 1219, the Khwarezmian Empire was a legitimate superpower. Their armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Their cities were architectural marvels. They had the finest Persian weapons and armor. And then they made one catastrophic mistake. A Khwarezmian governor executed about 150 Mongol ambassadors and merchants who'd come on a peaceful trade mission. The Shah endorsed this decision. Big mistake. Huge. Genghis Khan showed up with roughly 200,000 warriors and proceeded to demonstrate what systematic extermination actually looks like. Samarkand, with 400,000 people, fell in 5 days. Every single inhabitant was executed except for 30,000 artisans they enslaved. Bukhara, the center of Islamic learning, was burned to ashes, and its entire population was marched out to the steppes to die. But Nishapur was something else entirely. A Mongol prince got killed during the siege, and Genghis Khan ordered complete obliteration. They spent 6 full days killing every man, woman, child, and animal in the city. Contemporary sources claim 1.7 million deaths, though modern historians think it was probably closer to 200,000. Either way, they organized the skulls into pyramids, separate ones for men, women, and children. And Merv, possibly the largest city in the world at the time with up to 1 million people, surrendered after the Mongols promised mercy. 13 days of killing later, only 400 artisans were left alive. One woman survivor tried to count the bodies and gave up after 1.3 million. An empire that took centuries to build was erased in less than 2 years. That's what Jalal al-Din was up against. So when this Mongol pursuit force, 30,000 elite warriors under the command of Shigi Kutuku, one of Genghis Khan's adopted sons, comes hunting for Jalal al-Din in the Afghan mountains, everyone expects the same result as always. Because here's the thing about Mongol warriors. They were absolutely terrifying. Trained from childhood, these guys could ride before they could walk. Their composite bows could punch arrows through armor at 200 yards. Each warrior maintained 4 or 5 horses, so they could rotate through fresh mounts and cover 100 miles in a single day. Their tactics were brutally effective. Stay mobile. Shower the enemy with arrows. Never commit to close combat until the enemy formation breaks. They'd use feigned retreats to draw pursuers into ambushes. If you hid behind walls, they'd surround and starve you. If you tried to match their mobility, they'd run you into exhaustion and destroy you. They seemed literally impossible to defeat. But Jalal al-Din had been studying them. He'd been watching the pattern of their victories, and he noticed something crucial. They always won through mobility and archery. Their entire tactical system depended on movement, shooting and maneuvering simultaneously, controlling the distance of engagement, never getting pinned down in prolonged close combat. Their power came from the fact that they could move and shoot at the same time. So Jalal al-Din came up with a strategy that seemed absolutely insane but might, just might, be the only thing that could work. Late in 1221, in a valley near Parwan, Jalal al-Din positions his force with the mountains at their back. No retreat possible. And then he gives the order that should have doomed them all. About 20,000 of his horsemen, men who've been trained their entire lives to fight from horseback, climb down and form up as foot archers and infantry. Dense formations, shields locked, archers arranged in ranks behind them. Only 10,000 cavalry remain mounted on the flanks. What he's created is essentially a human fortress, completely immobile but concentrated, capable of sustained accurate archery without having to control horses at the same time. When Shigi Kutuku sees this formation, he must be absolutely baffled. Every enemy the Mongols had faced either tried to match their mobility or hid behind city walls. Nobody had ever deliberately given up their mobility. It must have looked like suicide. The battle begins exactly how Mongol battles always begin. Waves of light cavalry advance, unleashing absolutely massive volleys of arrows. 30,000 archers firing 15 to 20 arrows per minute means you're looking at 500,000 arrows in the opening minutes. The sound is described in sources as continuous thunder, a roar that drowns out everything else. Arrows literally darkening the sky. This tactic usually works because horses panic under sustained arrow fire and break formation, or infantry defenders exhaust themselves trying to maintain shields for hours until they collapse. But Jalal al-Din's dismounted cavalry were different. These were professional warriors who'd survived the apocalypse. They'd watched entire cities get murdered. They had nothing left to fear, so they locked their shields, absorbed the arrow storm, and maintained formation. And here's the crucial part. Because they were on foot without having to control horses, they could return accurate, sustained fire. A mounted archer shoots while moving, which makes long-range accuracy difficult. A foot archer stands stable, aims carefully, shoots methodically. For the first time in decades of conquest, the Mongol arrow tactics weren't working. The Mongols tried their standard feigned retreat, pulled back to draw the enemy into pursuit. Jalal al-Din orders his men not to move under any circumstances. The dismounted troops just stay in formation and keep shooting at any Mongols in range. This is completely outside Mongol doctrine. Enemies either broke and ran, or they pursued into ambushes. Jalal al-Din's army did neither. They were just a bristling wall of shields and arrows that refused to budge. Hours pass. The Mongols fire until their arrows are depleted, which almost never happened. They attempt cavalry charges, warriors at full gallop trying to break through. But the dense shield formation combined with accurate stationary archer fire cuts down horses and riders before they can make contact. And then comes the decisive moment. It's afternoon. The sun is blazing. Both armies are exhausted. The Mongols have committed fully to breaking the center, concentrating their forces in repeated charges against the immobile formation. And in doing so, they've left their flanks exposed, stretched thin. Jalal al-Din signals his 10,000 mounted cavalry, fresh men with rested horses who've been waiting on the wings the entire battle, watching their dismounted comrades hold the line for hours. They charge the Mongol flanks with devastating force. The Mongols are exhausted, their arrows depleted, and suddenly they're caught between the dismounted infantry acting as an anvil and the cavalry acting as a hammer. For the first time in decades of conquest, the Mongols break. Their formations shatter. Warriors who've never experienced defeat panic. They try to disengage and regroup, but Jalal al-Din's cavalry gives them no space. The pursuit becomes a slaughter in the mountain passes. The casualty figures tell the story. 10 to 15,000 Mongols killed or scattered. Greater losses than they'd taken conquering the entire Khwarezmian Empire. Jalal al-Din lost maybe 5 to 8,000 men. His insane gambit with the dismounted archers had worked. He'd broken the Mongol advantage for the first time anyone could remember. News of the victory spread across the Islamic world like wildfire. Jalal al-Din was hailed as the first man to defeat the Mongols in open battle. Within weeks, his army grew to nearly 70,000 men, the largest force assembled against the Mongols since the war began. But here's the fatal mistake. Jalal al-Din had defeated a Mongol army, not Genghis Khan himself, and Genghis Khan was absolutely enraged. He swore to hunt Jalal al-Din personally and erase him from existence. The Mongol main army, 50,000 elite warriors, swept across every city that had supported Jalal al-Din, destroying them with terrifying speed. Jalal al-Din was forced into constant retreat. Genghis Khan refused to engage unless conditions favored him completely. And finally, late in 1221, Genghis Khan trapped him at the Indus River. Jalal al-Din had the river behind him, and the full Mongol force closing in. He tried the dismounted archer wall again. But this time, the Mongols had learned. They avoided the center entirely, sweeping around both flanks with overwhelming numbers, completely encircling the Khwarezmian army. The dismounted archers, immobile by design, couldn't reposition fast enough. Attacks came from every direction. The formation collapsed into chaos. And then Jalal al-Din did something legendary. Surrounded at the river's edge, he spurred his horse and leaped off a 40-foot cliff into the raging Indus River, still wearing full armor. Against all odds, he survived the fall, swam across, and reached the far bank alive while Mongol archers fired continuously. Genghis Khan himself watched from the cliff and reportedly told his sons, "A son should be like that." He acknowledged the courage even while vowing to kill him. Jalal al-Din spent the next 10 years wandering from court to court, trying to raise armies, never again reaching the strength he had at Parwan. In 1231, Mongol scouts finally found him and killed him in a minor skirmish in Kurdistan. And here's the tragedy. His revolutionary tactic died with him. He discovered a practical counter to the Mongols: stable infantry, disciplined archery, fresh cavalry reserves. But nobody lived to spread the method. The Mamluks would develop similar principles decades later at Ain Jalut, but they did it independently. Unaware, Jalal al-Din had figured it out first. The cruel irony is that his greatest victory sealed his fate. If he'd fled into exile, he might have lived peacefully as an honored refugee prince, but by resisting, by actually defeating them, he guaranteed Genghis Khan would never stop hunting him, because Jalal al-Din had shattered the illusion of Mongol invincibility. If one man could defeat them, others might resist. Genghis Khan couldn't allow that. History remembered Jalal al-Din for his desperate flight and death, not his brilliant victory. The 30,000-foot archers who stopped the unstoppable Mongols became a forgotten footnote. The triumph at Parwan was erased by Mongol vengeance. Genghis Khan made the world remember only the price of defiance, not the possibility of victory. Jalal al-Din proved the Mongols weren't invincible, but proving it sealed his fate. His courage inspired thousands, yet condemned him to be hunted to the end. The man who defeated the Mongols became a wandering legend, admired, feared, and ultimately forgotten. The Battle of Parwan stands not as a historical turning point, but as a brief, brilliant reminder that even the greatest empires can be challenged, even if the price of that challenge is everything.